it's a difficult concept to get across because I don't believe in ghosts. And the urban weird is the things that we see every day and the things that unnerve us. If you just simply take a look around your house right now, your room that you're sitting in, and you stare at one object, after a while that will become weird. It will become strange to you. My work is, or has been, working on games, horror games that are designed to scare people, and so therefore it helps me to understand what scares people or what is creepy within the world, and then try and recreate that within a game world. This is in another mind, which can then share him with another mind, and you can reproduce again. This is a real living thing. This is not a mythological ghost anymore. Slenderman was made by one person, but he's become a living thing because that's what we've made him. They are the things that are created by our imaginations, by our culture, to remind us of the things that went before. Ghosts are little bits of intangible cultural heritage. And so academia finds it really difficult to take seriously anything that we can't do that with. So the idea of my research is to sort of say, I can't bring you a ghost, but I can put a ghost in this game and you can experiment on that. And this ghost in this game is exactly the same. It uses exactly the same laws as a ghost in the real world. It's a meme that wants to survive.
Talk with Andrew Wedgbury. So Andrew Wedgbury is known as a game design lecturer. He's a hauntologist and a researcher with deep fascination for the supernatural, the unexplained and the unsettling. And for as long as he can remember, he's been captivated by the hidden realms of human fear and curiosity. So he invites you to explore them with him through his research and experimental games and writings.
Thanks, Caroline. So thanks everyone for coming along and spending time to listen to me. I do talking for a living, but it's always nice to be invited to speak to and meet new people. And so this is the first time I've ever had the chance to talk at ASSAP, and I'm really happy to be doing that. Just a little bit about me before I start, and it's just a really kind of a disclaimer. So I am I'm described by several organisations as a hauntologist. Hauntology has very little, in fact, to do with ghosts and hauntings. Hauntology is a philosophical opinion that the past always haunts the present, so everything in the present is affected by the past. And one very small part of that, which I kind of focus my time on, is the idea that ghosts are real and literally real. And it's a difficult concept to get across because I don't believe in ghosts, yet I thoroughly believe in ghosts. For me, ghosts are a concept, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But one thing I did want to say, and the thing that we always need to say, is that this area, this field of psychical research, anomalous phenomena, almost got a history of being hijacked by people with the word doctor in front of their name. And I don't really want to be part of that tradition. I am a sociologist by training. Somehow I've managed to find myself as a game designer, and somehow within that I've managed to find myself in this particular world of considering paranormal and mainly horror games. So I work for Staffordshire University, potentially, well, actually, one of the best 3 or 4 universities in the world for games design. I started the horror special interest group at Staffordshire University. I'm a part of the Hauntological Society at St John's, and I also have a fair bit to do with an organisation in Denmark called Recreational Fear. All organisations you should think about looking up at some point. So that's a little bit about me and a kind of disclaimer. And so what I'm going to say might be a bit controversial to some people, especially people that want to believe in the literal existence of an afterlife. and I fully understand that, and I'm fully willing to be criticised on that. But hopefully you'll bear with me till the end, and I'll be happy to answer questions. Okay, so what is the urban weird? So urban weird is something that's come about and is being used more and more often, and it's a kind of offshoot of folk horror. So as you can imagine, if you know horror movies, folk horror is very much based in the countryside, based around folklore and tradition. And a small group of researchers and writers and thinkers have started to talk about something called the urban weird. And the urban weird is the things that we see every day and the things that unnerve us. If you just simply take a look around your house right now, your room that you're sitting in, and you stare at one object, after a while that will become weird. It will become strange to you. And this is what the urban weird is. When we talk about the urban weird, we're probably talking more about alleyways, dark rooms. Nan's kitchen of a night time when you was a kid is the concept of the domestic weird. And so when we live in a house, that house becomes very scary to us. In fact, last night, I can share an experience. Last night, lying in bed for no apparent reason, I suddenly heard a child giggling in my garden at 3 a.m. And I'm logical, so I went and checked it out. It turned out to be something that was very explainable. It was motorbikes revving in the distance. It just sounded like a child. But it's just an example of the domestic weird. Things that happen in your house that you have no explanation for. And we all do it. We all do it every day. We all see things and we all hear things. As a child, I was very much into the paranormal. All my children are named for fairies because I was very much into fairies as a child. So I called my daughter Faye, Madison Faye, and my son James Arthur, after the famous Arthur Conan Doyle, who investigated the Cottingley fairies. Things literally existed. And unfortunately, one of the things that academia does to you is kind of makes you question your own opinion about the world. And so I've become a little bit more of a skeptic as I've gone along. And so that's the grounding of what urban weird is. And hopefully you'll get an idea of that in your day-to-day life. I really do encourage you to look at things for a little bit longer than you normally would and suddenly think about how strange that is. An empty chair is a really haunting thing. It's an example of hauntology. It's an empty chair is haunted by the people that once sat in it. Okay? So hopefully that kind of outlined what I'm talking about. So what I want to talk about today are just things really that interest me, but I also want to talk about my own research. And hopefully at the end, some of you will think, oh, that's not a bad idea. And we might want to reach out and get involved and talk further about this. If not, then I fully understand. But there's a few things, a few lines that go through my personal research. And remember that my work is or has been working on games, horror games that are designed to scare people. And so therefore it helps me to understand what scares people or what is creepy within the world and then try and recreate that within a game world. And so that's what I do professionally. But my work is shifting and is becoming more associated with all things strange then. So what I'm going to go through today, I'm going to speak about household spirits, which is very much my thing. A few urban legends, digital demons, my practice, and I'm going to try and reflect and try and make some sense of the things that I'm talking about. And then I'm going to try and answer your questions. So, brownies, boggarts, and house elves. It's a thing that has always fascinated me. For a games designer, looking around my room, I can see at least 3 books on fairies. I know I've got at least 20 books on fairies kicking around somewhere. And they've been a thing in my life since very little. And I don't know why. I do know that as a child, I had lots of paranormal experiences of seeing things around the house. And I have something that is schizotypal personality disorder, which sounds like I'm a schizophreniac and I'm going to go around murdering people, but it's not that. It does mean I see things all the time. So things that most ghost hunters would call ghosts. I see shadow figures all the time. But I'm of a point where I know that that's in my imagination. It distracts me sometimes because I'll be talking to people and get distracted by a shadow figure standing behind them or a person crouching in the corner. It's just part of my personality and a thing that I do. So maybe that's where my interest in these kind of things comes from. I don't know. But going back in history, brownies, boggarts, and house elves, we've always been told by folklore that these things are in our minds, that they're in our imaginations. Okay, so there's a very famous story about a fairy called Ainsel, and it goes back to probably Staffordshire, I think possibly Northern Ireland, and the fact that people already knew that fairies were made up, okay? And they already knew that although they used them as a metaphor for very important things, and they existed literally in their world, they knew that the literality of them was not literal. I'll get back to that in a moment because it sounds like a really stupid concept. But the story goes that a little girl's playing by the fire and she burns herself because a fairy comes out of the fire and burns her. And she says to her mom, Mommy, I've burnt myself. And her mother says, who was it? And she says, it was my Ainsel, my own self. And the fairy's called Ainsel. So in other words, it gets people into trouble. But the folklore is established that trouble is quite often ourselves. And therefore, Ainsel is just the fairy of us. It's us as people, okay? And those of you, I hasten to say that although I am very much a skeptic, there are things in lots of my research that have come up about fairies that are difficult for me to easily explain. For example, if any of you have ever read the Cottingley fairies, there's a statement in there that fairies in their normal life are faint balls of light with a concentrated nucleus. And that sounds shockingly like an orb in a time before we realised that there were orbs, before we could photograph such things as anomalies on cameras. So it's quite an interesting thing that sometimes folklore matches what we believe. And that I suppose is what needs investigating in the world, as far as I can see, but not often. Okay, that's a rare occurrence. Today, though, we would probably call fairies poltergeists, right? Because they move stuff and they make things difficult for us. And this is a picture from a French magazine in the 1900s, 1911. I'll make no secret of it. I found a picture on Wikipedia. So this is a picture from a French magazine of around 1911. It is a picture of a poltergeist or a poltergeist event, but often these poltergeist events are basically what would have been called historically fairy events. Yeah, fairies were around to disrupt the household, and whereas in the countryside, fairies tended to be more malevolent. In towns and in an urban setting, fairies tend to be more tricky then. So benevolent fairies in the country, friendly, helpful quite often. In the house, they tend to be a little bit more tricky and they require a little bit more appeasement, okay? And so we see this as people move in the Industrial Revolution from the countryside, where they felt free and happy, into an environment where often they lived 10 to 12 people in a one-bedroom, one living area house. The spirits followed them, the fairies followed them, and their belief in fairies followed them, but they didn't follow them nicely. As they started to feel displaced, uncomfortable, oppressed by the world, then so did the fairies. And this kind of underlines the way that fairy folk, as we believe them, or as they were believed in pre-industrial Britain, began to kind of live with us. And so this kind of illustrates what I mean when I say I very much don't believe in ghosts, what I very much do. It's difficult for many people to understand my point of view. Just because something is a figment of the imagination does not make that not real. And I'll come on to why that is the case in a moment. But things that are provable to be figments of a person's imagination are also very much alive and have a presence of their own. And so that's where the concept of ghosts for me comes from a hauntological point of view. And we can see that fairies and spirits kind of into the modern era, okay? And we can understand that many really well-known poltergeist events were a result of difficult situations at home. teenagers who are repressed, or usually young girls who are going through certain periods in their life, experience poltergeists. And this is a kind of example of something that is part of you still taking on a life of its own. Okay, so by saying that I don't believe in ghosts or I don't believe in poltergeists doesn't mean I don't believe that they exist. It means I'm trying to conceptualize them as no proof of an afterlife then, but still proof of a really interesting living thing that lives with us, and that is well in need of research. Bringing it up to the modern day, we see things that start to inherit those little ghostly phenomena. And one of the things that most inherited that ghostly phenomena, one of the things that kind of springs to my mind, and I don't know if anybody experienced this, but I think it was about 2016, Amazon started randomly laughing in the middle of the night, and nobody knew what that was for. And it scared a lot of people. I didn't experience it, but a friend of mine did, and rang me up at 3 a.m. in the morning, and my Amazon's laughing. He's giving me a creepy laugh, and I can remember finding that quite hilarious. And it turned out, according to Amazon, that what was happening is that Alexa was hearing the word laugh, and it was laughing for us. So if we say to Alexa now, Alexa, laugh, it won't laugh. We have to say to it, Alexa, can you laugh? And the can you was put in there to try and stop it accidentally misunderstanding snoring or talking in our sleep as Alexa, laugh. And it happened a lot. But of course, this is very strange. And this was interpreted as ghosts or as something supernatural. Of course, it wasn't. It was technological. And that's where my interest kind of is sparked, because what I do as a job is to try and make those things occur in games. I try and make something spectacular occur in a game world where you can experience something haunted. And it's more than just experiencing a game, it's experiencing an actual event. And it's quite difficult. In fact, it's virtually impossible to do. But as I continue my research and plod on trying new things, I find new applications for this. And so it's really becoming quite a central thing for my research, and also beginning to be taken quite seriously outside of this kind of field, and which is quite useful, because for any field, paranormal investigation and anomalous phenomena included, the real success is to be taken seriously by other academics, or to find a real use for what we do within other fields. And only then can we start to really push the agenda of what we do. And so I think that this is a really good step forward. Coming even further forward, we start to see these things which kind of start a little bit more focusing in on what my concept of a ghost is, or my concept of the paranormal is. And that concept is that things get made up online every day. A prime example of that is Slenderman. I don't have the full documentation available, perhaps somebody here knows this, but we do know who made up Slenderman. The person that made up Slenderman has taken several creators to court frequently in order to get his royalties for the fact that his idea has been misused. And yet, Slenderman is really seen in paranormal circumstances. People take photographs of something that looks like Slenderman, and not all of these people are lying. Murders have been committed, or attempted murders have been attempted in the name of Slenderman. These things have not just become fiction, but they have become real in their own way. They've become part of our real life worlds. Okay, things that we really fear. And this is the kind of underpinning of my idea. So, if a ghost can be made, then a ghost can be made in technology, and it can haunt us in ways that go beyond the technology itself. In space, which is what I build when I build a game, something can exist that can defy explanation. And it can exist in a way that is even beyond my intention as the programmer and the developer. And that's really quite interesting to me, because it takes on a life of its own And I'm going to explain why that takes on a life of its own in just a little moment. But the other thing I wanted to point out quite importantly was this idea of space and the hauntingness of space. It's a really important part of philosophy, the hauntingness of space. And I don't know if anybody remembers the backrooms phenomenon, which is still kind of going on, and people still play backrooms. Quite often these games have got nothing in them. They're simply office space, big empty spaces with buzzing lights and something that feels just wrong. It's Freud's concept of the unheimlich, which is always mistranslated to be the uncanny, but actually it means the unhomelike. So it's something you know, but it's not right. There's something there that you can't quite put your finger on. And so this is the kind of thing that we're trying to trigger within the game world. And we're doing this for serious reasons, okay? So this isn't just, it started off as we want to scare people, make games more scary. But now, as my work progresses, it's starting to become, I want to haunt spaces that aren't real with things that aren't real but are unexplainable. And the reason that this is hypothetically possible is because of a theory which I have researched in the past, which is called memetics. Richard Dawkins originally proposed it in his book, The Selfish Gene. And the idea is that the concept is that an idea becomes a living thing. Like all of us as animals are kind of driven to evolve, become more than we are. We've evolved from being an ape-like creature into being a human creature. And I'm not sure what human means these days, but we have evolved. We've become more adapted. So do to ideas. Ideas, just because they have no physical body, does not make them a living thing, does not make them have an agenda to try and be passed on. So we can see there that the Slenderman has the agenda to be passed on. It has a technique to do that. Our technique is reproduction. His technique is to be seen, okay, and be told to other people. So by being seen, he reproduces. He reproduces in another mind, which can then share him with another mind, and he can reproduce again. This is a real living thing. This is not a mythological ghost anymore. Slenderman was made by one person, but he has become a living thing because that's what we've made him. And that's a really interesting concept. So when we see a ghost, then, is that living thing just trying to scare us? Or when we experience a ghost, is it trying to scare us as part of its tactic to become remembered, to become passed on, and therefore reproduce? And if we can assume that, and memetics, which is a kind of almost forgotten science, it was kind of a really massive thing in the 90s, and then it became less important because nobody could really see the use of it. But memetics tells us that things really do want to live. Ideas really do want to live and be passed on and reproduce the same as we do. And so we take that from a sometimes spiritual and sometimes chuckled about by science idea of the paranormal exists, and we put that into an almost biological entity that says, no, actually, we're studying these spirits that have got this real desire to live. And what they're doing is they're using us to pass on and to reproduce. And so it starts to become a really interesting kind of approach, perhaps a philosophy, perhaps a pie in the sky idea, but it starts to become a real interesting approach to actually an angle to research these phenomena from. And so that's kind of what the Slenderman has given us. He's given us that creature, and he's been stood right there in front of us for many, many years. And only now, well, for me at least, only now is it actually becoming quite obvious that that's what's happening here. So what I do then, I'll move on to what I do as a job, I guess. So I'm described by some as a hauntologist, and I've kind of alluded to that before. So hauntology is a philosophy that is expounded by people like Marsh Fisher and Ryder, that says that the past will always haunt the present, okay? And so we can see that in many things, but one of the things we see that mostly in is wartime bunkers, for example. in which case they are very much scarred into our landscape. They're a haunting of the war, which, if we attend them, feel very much ominous. And we probably don't know why. It's a past haunting the present. They're designed to do a job that we no longer understand, and therefore it unnerves us. But what they also are, and what is really important for my current direction for gun research, is they're also our heritage. They're there to scare us, and the reason that they scare us is because it's reminding us of something that happened in the past. What I recently decided to start doing was to think about ghosts not as something spiritual, and for many they will remain something spiritual, and if they don't remain something spiritual for many people, then ironically my ideas suddenly die and they're no longer any use. But for me, when I'm working with them, they're not something spiritual, but they're something of our heritage. They are the things that are created by our imaginations, by our culture, to remind us of the things that went before. Ghosts are little bits of intangible cultural heritage, things that we must preserve and we must pass on. And again, it starts to step away from a thing that's a spiritual thing to something that's almost a conservationist thing. Something that's very important to today's society is to conserve things. And I think that if we see ghosts as a living thing that's a meme, and we see that they are there to help us by reminding us of our past, then it becomes our responsibility to make sure that they're there forever. And that's where my work is going to go in. And so recently I started working in a little street in Stoke-on-Trent where I live, and the street is called Short Street. There's quite a few videos about Short Street and the ghosts and the hauntings that happen there on YouTube. And so I started to dig into what Short Street was about and what it was telling us. And I discovered that Short Street had a really sordid history of murder, child death, disease. They were 2-bedroom houses, one up, one down, or 2-room houses, where there's reports of up to 12 people sleeping in one bed, reports of children dying, being smothered by people sleeping in one bed. And so really scary place to have lived in during the Industrial Revolution or the Potteries era here in Stoke. But what's happened is that they've become ghosts and they're telling us about the past. As it happens, Short Street, that is now known as Short Street, was not actually Short Street, I discovered. It was a place called Secret Alley, which is even more deeply mystifying. Secret Alley should be brought back, in my opinion. And it was a place where people were born and where they died, and where we still remember them by seeing ghosts occasionally. And so I started to think about what could I do to make sure that those ghosts don't get forgotten. What can we do as people to make sure that the ghost stories that scare us or the things that make us experience these phenomena don't get forgotten, they don't fade over time. And so my work currently is to do something like this. This is a mock-up by AI itself, by the way, quite hauntological. But my work is to build a game about Short Street, which both tells the ghost stories and also tells the real stories linked to those ghost stories. And then the idea is that there will be a plaque put up close by to Short Street. People will be able to scan the QR code, go and play that game on their phone. It'll be a horror game based around the ghosts. And we can take our world of ghosts and we can put it online to a degree. As this technology advances, we'll put it up online even better. And things will work even more interestingly and perfectly. For now, we're very close to getting our first game out there, and that will be the Short Street game. There's then several hauntings. Stoke seems particularly... I'm not from Stoke. I'm from south of Birmingham, but I live in Stoke because of my job. And Stoke seems very, very fascinated with ghosts. And that's really good for me because it means there's lots of places for me to try and get these plaques put up. I think that's something that we should do. as people that are interested in ghosts and interested in hauntings, is that we should have a way of helping people experience those hauntings, and these plats is what they do. Okay, and it's a really cheap way to do things. I've spent many days working on the game, but the plaque itself is only a few pounds. So it means I can stick a plaque up and I can show people the ghosts. And so I just want to go back. I want to loop back to what I said at the beginning, is that I don't believe in ghosts, but I very much believe in ghosts. So when somebody comes to me and says, I saw this, I did that, I believe them very much. Yesterday, for example, I heard that child giggle in my garden. I very much believed it was a child giggling in my garden. For me, it turned out not to be, but for many people, these things are valid and meaningful experiences. And I think that those people that do experience these things should feel themselves very honoured, because it's the past calling to you personally, to try and tell you personally that it's there. And so when you've experienced a ghostly phenomenon, or you go on a ghostly investigation and you experience something strange, you have an almost moral duty to then go and tell somebody else. Just basically to say that the work that I do blends the idea of game design with folklore, it blends handmade art, and it's just really to say, if anybody's interested in this kind of aspect, and I can understand why many people won't be, please do get in touch with my website, which is drwedge.uk, or any other way, because I'd really like this kind of work to be not just me and a few houses kind of academics, and to involve real people. And so that's me done. So any questions, I'll be very happy to. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you. No, you can turn it back on now, Andrew, if you want to. If you want to stop sharing the screen, we can chat properly then. Apologies I interrupted you, but thank you so much. We are getting a lot of comments coming through from people saying it was really interesting talk and the direction in which your research is going. So I'm sure that there'll be lots of people who want to ask you direct questions this evening. But for me, let's just try and find out a little bit more about you, because you are somebody who is new to ASSAP that we haven't actually experienced in a talk before. You've got all these links with obviously university, academia, and working through Denmark and things as well. How do you think that the paranormal is received in academia of a mainstream university?
Okay, it's not. Right, so you will find that the people that are working in this kind of field or this kind of area try to find links with other things, because we're so far into the idea of the paranormal now that we constantly try to prove something that's difficult to prove. It's intangible. Even if you believe literally in the idea of the spirit world, it's intangible. We can't pick it up and take it into a university and say, experiment on this. We can't do that yet. And so in the academic world, paranormal is, apart from in a few isolated spots, not taken that seriously. And if you try to do something with it, sometimes you'll get discouraged. The only reason I've managed to forge on is because in this country, thank God, it's illegal to discourage an academic to do something that they're interested in. And so by framing my work as horror, a lot of people are starting to get on board. So hopefully the future's bright.
Thank you. I also picked up on the fact that you said that you, as far as you can remember, you've seen shadows through the condition that I've forgotten the name that you gave it.
It's a typal personality disorder. Yeah. It causes the person to have deep beliefs in unprovable things is the actual internet definition, I believe. And so we do see things, and it's something you get used to. But when I was in my 30s, I went to my doctors, and he said, because it's never been a thing I want to get rid of. They kind of become your friend. So it's another thing I've really looked into that much. I just know that it's there, and it's something that I do.
Thank you. It's very refreshing that you're talking about it, because it's not something that's really open in communication from people. But I was going to ask you for the follow-on hook question. At what point did you think to yourself that it wasn't the usual thing, that everybody else experienced this as well?
Sorry, what do you mean by the usual thing?
Seeing the dark shadows.
Oh, so the fact that I can see them and nobody else can, for a start, started to make me wonder if I was just, because I would as a child, I'd say, "Did you see that?" And it would be, "No, I didn't see that." So now it's kind of, yeah, I could just look up from my desk and see somebody stood there, and so I guess I started to pick it apart, because at first, and in my teens, you think you're insane. For a long time, I felt like somebody was following me constantly, and that was a really dark something that followed me constantly. And then when I got into my 20s, by that time, I just accepted that there was something there. And then by the time I got to my 30s, I can't remember what happened. It was early 30s, it was probably even late 20s. And I went to a GP and he said, "You're suggesting you may have or symptoms of schizotypal personality disorder." And I went to a psychologist and they confirmed it because of my beliefs in things being there. But there's a very subtle thing there. My belief in things being there, but my knowledge of them not. Schizophrenia tends to be you, as I understand. I'm not an expert. Schizophrenia tends to believe that you believe that the things are there, but I kind of have adapted to believe that they're not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Although most of the people who are here tonight probably would have also experienced some kind of shadow forms. I know that I have myself within the paranormal. So I'm just interested in hearing your concept of it.
This is on a daily basis for me. This will be so. If somebody comes to me and says, "I've seen something," then I'm thinking, well, now I think, well, it might have just been a temporary glitch in your brain. But for me, I could see 5 or 6 a day. I could be sat here talking to you now, sat next to one. It's nothing. It's nothing new. And I don't even speak about it in my day-to-day life. It just comes to. I sometimes say, "Oh, I see shadow people," but just to let people know if I'm talking to you and I suddenly look off into the distance, that's probably what's happening. But yeah, so the fact that it's so frequent for me is one of the things that makes it so normal, I think.
Yeah, well, thank you for talking to us about that. So have you actually developed that in part of your gaming, that you've included that as part of the horror?
I think so. Games are really difficult, and it sounds like they shouldn't be. There's something we call critical play, which is the kind of making games that do more than entertain. And my games don't really entertain; they kind of aim to teach. And so the idea of my personal experience, I'm not trying to get that. I'm trying to get to what everybody's experience is. So one of the things I'm really going to start working on towards the end of this year is going to be, and hopefully you guys will get involved in that, is going to be the kind of the world's biggest watched haunting. And the idea will be that there will be an online game that will have several cameras that you can choose between. But in that world, hauntings will happen, and they will happen based on how people report what they've seen. So the more people report, the more things will happen, and the more stranger things will get. And the idea is, the ultimate goal is to create an emergent haunting within a virtual space. So something that isn't programmed by me, but emerges as a result of people interacting with space.
So would that be a form of AI having free thought in which way that it goes within the game?
That ghosts are a meme, that they are that non-tangible thing that wants to survive, then that isn't AI, because you can't give memes any kind of intelligence. What they do is they adapt to the way that we interact with them, and therefore they get their message across that way. So I don't think it's AI per se. And I mean, at the moment, we're working on a project which is about using AI to make the world, to make culture more accessible to people. And I'm definitely involved in that from an AI point of view. And I definitely develop AI. And a lot of my thinking is done with AI. And you will have noticed some AI pictures in my presentation. So I'm not against AI, but I don't think what I'm doing is necessarily AI. It's artificial life more than artificial intelligence.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So how can members of ASSAP and other academia help you in what it is that you need to do? What would you like from everybody?
What I'd really like is for us to work together with people that are interested in bringing in when we go on paranormal investigations, and I've been on them myself, we tend to go into them with the assumption that there's something there, there's something spiritual there. I would like paranormal investigation groups to get somebody on board that goes in with the assumption that there is nothing there, but it is in fact a meme. It's mimetic, and that way we can start scientifically studying these things as a new kind of life rather than thinking of them as ghosts. Because if I'm right, then that's what they are. They're a kind of life that wants to live, and the way they want to live is by reminding us of the past. It's a really sensible way to survive if you think about it. It's a really sensible way to spread your idea, is to scare people, because you're going to tell people that you're scared.
And how would people get in contact with you to let you know this, they can be involved?
Yeah, they can get into contact with me through my website, which is drwedge.uk. You'll see a lot of horror games. I like to think about starting some sort of small group where we can have people trained. And I'm not sure what that training will take, so it's not a thing we're going to do this week. But I would really like to start a small group and have people trained to think in terms of memes, so that they can then go out into the world and join paranormal investigation groups as an extra team member to kind of take that approach and try and understand from that point of view.
Thank you.
And also, of course, sorry, whilst you've got you, ASSAP could really get involved with the idea that we can start preserving ghosts through these kind of plaques. This is something that ASSAP could really get on board with. The plaques are just a few pounds. If people want to sponsor one, that's something that we could really do. If ASSAP wanted to come to me with places that they thought would be good places to turn into a game and to commemorate in this way, then that's something we could definitely do. So please reach out if that's something you've got an idea for.
Thank you. I will make sure that we repost your email address so that people know exactly where to send it. But before I hand over to Kristian to ask the questions, when is this game that you said is coming out?
At the moment, I'm working on it. It's not going to be what most people expect. It is mostly it's an art game, so it's made out of cut pieces of paper. The idea of that is that those cut pieces of paper kind of represent something of the ghost. I mean, there's a piece here of the game that I'm working on. Bear with me. So this is a kind of side. You see that, guys? That's kind of a side view representation of the kind of houses that people lived in. And Sid, who is my main character, and actually, I'd like to tell you about Sid. Sid was Mr. Sidney Stolt, lived in this very house and died the year I was born in this very house. And so he's become kind of my kind of oppo character. So he's the person that explores. What I will do is I will post chances for people to play test the game on the ASSAP Facebook forum, little bits of the game as it comes available. October is when I'm hoping to be finished by.
Thank you. Thanks. So I'm going to hand over to you now to Kristian to ask the questions. But again, from me, Andrew, thanks ever so much for your talk today.
Thank you.
Well, that was actually really wonderful. Thank you very much. And, you know, as a gamer myself, as a long-time gamer, and someone who's actually published games on Android, and I found your topics today are really engaging. Because, of course, for those who may have experienced something in the world, you know, to experience... So for those who perhaps have never seen those experiences, to take a snapshot, whether it be on a phone or whether it be on a computer or a PC, to have an experience that is kind of like a haunting, I think that really moves things forward in an interesting way. It is an option for people to experience the wonder of what might happen to an experience. And I think there's lots of things you could do around sound. There's lots of things you could do around visual, or even just the stimulation or the experience that they're having. But my question kind of is regarding cultural context. So you say that about putting these plaques out into the environment. So do you think the games would actually work well as a cultural preservation, engaging a modern audience who might not share the same cultural context?
I think if you look in many paranormal circles, the people that know about ghosts and get involved in ghosts are older people anyway, above, you know, a certain age. And there's research out there for that reason that knows about that. I mean, not everybody, of course, because you can't take a group of people and say everybody's old. My original PhD was fishing, and with the whole idea of the paranormal and the games, it is a really cool cultural tool, because it's kind of reminding younger people that there's things out there that might be more magical. And let's face it, the world is pretty dull, right? The world is pretty boring for kids. And to give them this kind of idea that there might be things out there that are more magical is a kind of a real gift, but also a real good tool to teach people. Because the same way that if I'm right about ghosts being a meme that scare us to be passed on, those memes can also pass on our cultural heritage. They embrace and carry our cultural heritage for us, and therefore they need preserving like any other animal or any other creature does.
Yeah, because I was thinking about, like, I got a neighbour 2 doors down from here, and they came from Ghana. So their experience of ghosts and witchcraft is very different to those who grew up watching Doctor Who or have had, stories and encounters of ghosts here. Their entire cultural context of what a ghost is entirely alien to them. So I found conversations with them to be quite interesting, actually. And I can imagine them, if you were to talk to them about a phantom hitchhiker or to give them that experience on a phone or a device, my wonder is, how will they see that? What's the cultural context of that?
It's very difficult because you're absolutely right. Ghosts don't translate culturally. So my work is in this country at the moment, because my work is in this country at the moment, because between me, you, and everybody in this room, you go to a funding organisation and say, give me some money to research ghosts, and it kind of gets scrumpled up straight away and chucked in the bin, because ghosts are very cultural, but nobody ever goes to these research organisations and say, give me some money to look at ghosts as a cultural artefact. But as my work progresses, hopefully I'll be able to spread that around the world and find ways to translate our cultural hauntings into ways that other cultures can understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
And vice versa, because that is what a brilliant way to use something that is just naturally in our environment, naturally part of our culture, to kind of understand other people and to kind of build bridges. So as my work progresses, hopefully we'll take on the world.
So one of the questions that I did ask a little bit further down was, are there specific games or designers you admire who align with your vision of blending folklore and interactive fear?
And I'm gonna say not really, because the games at the moment are as a consumer are entertainment, and what I'm trying to do is take it beyond that. So things like Baldur's Gate and stuff like that, and old game. I mean, you can even see aspects of hauntology in Pokemon games because of the way that you have to find things. It's kind of fun. You look at a Pokemon hunt as it could be kind of ghost hunt, right? You capture them and then they are in effect ghosts because they have no physical body because they're kept in the ball. So you start to pick apart what other games do, and you can see what I'm doing in them, but they're still not really quite pinning down what I'm trying to achieve. So my work is more a serious game side, so not really at the moment, but there is a lot of really good games out there. For example, there's a lot of good games. What do you like?
Well, I tend to like role-playing games or games where I could experience a universe where I can go and explore and have my own adventure, so like The Witcher or something.
Yeah, The Witcher is really good. And for some reason, all of a sudden, every game that I know, and I'm really quite concerned because this is my job, it escapes my head. But there's a lot of really good games out there that have done something, they're not really quite pinned it. They're not, and it might not be pinnable, right? It might not be doable, but that's why we do research, until we try to find out if it is.
Yeah, I mean, about 5 years ago, actually, I posted it here in the links, actually, for the ASSAP conference in 2020, when everyone was on lockdown, when we were all shut in our houses, and we did a conference online, which actually was the beginning of these weekly webinars. I did a presentation called about interactive entertainment with ghosts, really. So what games actually identify ghosts, not just as a generic enemy type or not just as a friendly helper, but actually where it's a intrinsic part of the game itself, like Luigi's Mansion, or there's a game called Lost Ember where you are a spirit who wanders a random open world and has the ability to basically become creatures in that environment. There's like a horse or a mongoose or something, so you're experiencing an open world that you as a spirit are connecting to different animals and then experiencing that life as a game. And there's some really interesting examples where people are playing as an external ghost, or you have a ghostly guide with you, and I find them to be really intriguing. So actually, I posted that link in the chat there, so have a go through.
There's oh, what's it called? Phasmophobia,
yeah.
Phasmophobia, there we go. Yeah, that's really good. But unfortunately, it gets a little bit predictable as you go on. And if anybody really wants to play a game that kind of comes close to what I'm trying to do, there's a really good game which is called Naissance. You can get it on Steam for free. And what it does is just an empty space that you explore. And it's scary because you're exploring an empty space. A space where you feel alien. And so, yeah, that really does it quite well as well, popping into my head.
So there's a question here from Mike Bembra Jackson. So, do you think memes are powerful and can have physical consequences? Ideas are powerful. Can you think of any examples from your work or elsewhere? So,
yeah, memes are powerful. Memes can make us see whatever they want us to see. Memes have not been researched anywhere near as much as they should have been. And the reason for that is because Richard Dawkins, who came up with the idea of the meme in his book, The Selfish Gene, kind of come up with them as a thought idea. And it wasn't until later on that people like Susan Blackmore started to really take on the idea of memes and start to think about them as a living thing. But then